Imagine for a moment that the loudest slogan of the Trump years, America First, hardened into its purest, most literal form at the border, a flat of 15 feet slapped on every cross-border package coming into the United States. Pitched as a way to make foreign sellers pay their fair share, to stop cheaters from using American infrastructure for free, to protect our jobs from the invisible flood of imported e-commerce. And then picture what that actually looks like when it collides with the real machinery of the modern economy, where companies like Amazon have stitched warehouses, delivery routes, data centers, and suppliers into a single North American ecosystem that does not care where the political line between North Dakota and Manitoba lies. That, in essence, is the story behind the headline, Trump's A-15 border fee drove Amazon to Canada George Will. A story about how one small, flat, politically satisfying charge can expose the fatal misunderstanding at the heart of Trump's entire trade and border strategy. The belief that you can tax and hassle your way to prosperity without driving away exactly the businesses and jobs you claim to protect. On paper, the fee sounds almost trivial, $15, less than the cost of a cheap lunch. But in the hyper-thin margins of logistics, where billions of packages move every year and competition is measured in pennies per unit, that number explodes into a structural shock. Every cross-border order fulfilled from a Canadian warehouse into the U.S. market now carries a new fixed cost that has nothing to do with the value of the goods, the weight of the box, or the distance traveled. It is simply a gatekeeping toll for crossing an imaginary line. Big players like Amazon can, for a time, absorb some of that hit through volume, subsidies, or shifting prices elsewhere. But even their accountants eventually reach the same conclusion George Will likes to deliver with dry finality. If you make it more expensive and unpredictable to serve a market from one side of a border, rational firms will move assets to the other side or shift more of their energy into markets that don't punish them for showing up. The moment the 15 fee becomes real, two things happen at once. First, American consumers finally see the true meaning of border protection on their receipts. Orders that once arrived in 2 days with free shipping from a warehouse in Ontario or British Columbia suddenly cost more, take longer, or disappear entirely. The low price. Long-tail items that only made sense because they could be fulfilled cheaply across borders vanish from the catalog, while domestic equivalents creep up in price because their sellers now enjoy a little shelter from competition. Second, Amazon's internal maps light up with red flags. Finance teams run models: how many packages cross the US-Canada line each day, how many merchants rely on cross-border fulfillment. How quickly can you reconfigure your network to avoid triggering the fee? Dispatchers and planners know something else: at borders are friction, and friction is death in logistics. Before the fee, Amazon could treat North America as a seamless grid, locate a fulfillment center where land, labor, and tax policy were favorable, then route orders dynamically based on inventory and demand, not on which side of a customs booth the warehouse sat. The Trump fee smashes that logic. Suddenly, there is a hard penalty for using the border as part of your optimization strategy. The circular slogan, "We'll make foreign sellers pay," collides with a more sobering reality. Amazon is not simply a foreign seller, it is also one of the largest employers in red and blue states alike, and it has choices about where to invest. Canada, watching this unfold from the other side, sees both opportunity and insult. On the one hand, Trump's A-15 fee is framed as a shot across the bow at companies and consumers who took integrated supply chains for granted. On the other, it is a quiet invitation. If Washington wants to make cross-border commerce more painful, Ottawa can make itself more attractive. Provincial governments sharpen their offers, tax incentives for new fulfillment centers, streamline permitting for warehouses, investment in border-adjacent infrastructure that lets Canadian hubs soak up the traffic now squeezed by U.S. policy. Elected officials go on television to say, politely but pointedly, that while the United States is welcome to build fiscal walls, Canada still believes in open flows of goods under clear rules. For Amazon's executives, the calculus is not ideological, it is mathematical. If every box that crosses southbound costs an extra 15, the only logical response is to push more of the value-added activity, warehousing, sorting, packaging, even customer support, onto the northern side for orders that can be served inside Canada and into other markets cleanly, and to consolidate U.S. operations in ways that minimize unavoidable border crossings. Over time, what you see from 30,000 feet is what George Will has warned about in column after column. In America First, policy that quietly hollowed out American advantage by punishing the very cross-border efficiencies that made U.S. platforms dominant in the first place. The fatal assumption behind Trump's border fee, like the assumption behind his steel tariffs, is that leverage runs in only one direction, that the U.S. can impose frictions and others will simply absorb them because or the biggest market. But Amazon's drift toward Canada under such a regime illustrates why that is no longer true, if it ever was. Yes, the US is huge, but so is the combined weight of every alternative path a global firm can take when Washington becomes too erratic. Canadian fulfillment serving Europe and Asia, new hubs in Mexico serving Latin America, green digital services and cloud infrastructure doubling down in jurisdictions that promise regulatory stability. The 15 fee is supposed to squeeze foreigners. Instead, it signals to every serious multinational, do not anchor too deeply in a country that treats your cross-border operations as a political stunt. There is a domestic irony here, too. Trump sells the fee as a way to help small businesses, implying that Amazon is an unalloyed rival to mom and pop shops. But millions of those small businesses now exist only because Amazon lowered the cost of reaching customers across state and national borders. Imposing a flat tax on that infrastructure does not magically resurrect Main Street. It simply forces countless micro-merchants, many based in the very rural and exurban counties that form Trump's base, to either raise prices, stop selling across the border, or follow Amazon's path and incorporate where policy is more rational. America discovers, once again, that you cannot surgically target global giants without nicking everyone riding on their coattails. For voters who never see the inside of a policy memo, the story eventually condenses into a symbol headlines about Amazon quietly expanding its Canadian logistics footprint while slowing or shelving planned facilities in the U.S., recruitment ads in Toronto and Calgary touting new warehouse jobs, Canadian politicians boasting about becoming a gateway for e-commerce at the exact moment U.S. leaders rail about being taken advantage of. The cable news crawl might still cheer strong borders and tough fees, but the lived experience for American consumers and workers is different. Higher cost, fewer options, factories and warehouses that might have opened in Ohio or Pennsylvania instead landing in Ontario or Quebec. As George Will would dryly note, this is the invisible tax of economic populism, the price of mistaking hostility for strategy. Trump's a 15 fee, in this telling, is less a revenue tool than a diagnostic. It reveals how little he and his advisors understood about how integrated platforms like Amazon actually operate. They saw a border and thought, wall. Amazon saw a border and once thought network. The fee forces a reversion to wall thinking on all sides. In the short term, that might feel emotionally satisfying to those who believe trade was a simple story of goose vests them. In the long term, it hands competitors and neighbors a gift, justification to market themselves as the reliable alternative to a United States that no longer understands its own strength. The cruelest twist in this narrative is that by driving Amazon's marginal decisions toward Canada, one fulfillment center moved here, one new regional HQ opened there, the border fee chips away at precisely the kind of soft power and standard-setting influence that once allowed the U.S. to shape the digital economy. As more e-commerce flows are routed through jurisdictions that do not punish cross-border shipments for political theater, the weight of those jurisdictions inside international standard-setting bodies grows. When new rules about data localization, digital taxes, or consumer protection are drafted, the voices in the room are no longer just American lawyers and lobbyists, they are Europeans, Asians, and Canadians who can point to their growing share of traffic and say, agreeing with some justification, we are where the action is now. Trump thought a 15 fee was a lever. In practice, it is a signal flare announcing America's willingness to tilt the playing field for domestic applause, and in an age where trust and predictability are as important as concrete and steel, that may be the most expensive signal of all.